You're listening to the low end of the dial, down where the numbers crowd together and the stations thin out, and the night gets a little quieter between them. It's 1:10, and the city outside this window has settled into that version of itself it only shows at this hour. The one without people in it, or almost without. Just the streetlights, doing their patient work, throwing their amber circles on the wet pavement. And one traffic light at the corner, cycling green to yellow to red for nobody. For the empty intersection, for the principle of the thing. The studio is warm. The board is lit up in its usual way. The green lights, the red ones. That row of sliders I know by feel now. The way a pianist knows the keys without looking. I've got a cup of coffee that's been sitting here long enough to forget it was ever hot, and I don't mind. The mug is good company. It gives my hands something to hold while my mouth does the talking. And at this hour, that's enough. Everything is enough at this hour. That's one of the things I like about it. I was sitting here a few minutes ago, between records, and the studio was quiet. That particular quiet that only happens when the music stops and the next record hasn't dropped yet, and the equipment is humming its low hum, and the clock on the wall is ticking. The clock on the wall. That's what did it. That's what started this. Because I heard the clock. I hear it every night. I've heard it 1,000 times, but tonight, for whatever reason, tonight I heard it. And it took me somewhere, not far. Not to any place dramatic or important. Just to a kitchen. A kitchen a long time ago, a kitchen on a Saturday morning early before anyone else in the house was awake. And the clock in that kitchen was ticking too. I don't know what time it was. I don't know what woke me. Something did, or nothing did. Maybe it was just the light, the early light, that thin grey light that comes before the real light, the light that doesn't illuminate so much as suggest. It came through the curtain in my room, and it was enough. I was awake, and the house was not. The house was still. And I want to stay with that stillness for a while, because it was a particular kind of stillness, different from any other. It wasn't the stillness of an empty house, where nobody is home and the rooms are just rooms, just space and furniture and air. This was the stillness of a full house where everyone was sleeping. The rooms were full, the beds were full. The hallway outside my door had people on both sides of it, breathing, dreaming, being somewhere else. And the house held all of that sleeping, all of that quiet living, the way a jar holds water, gently, without effort, just by being the shape it was. I got up. I must have gotten up, because I remember the hallway floor under my feet, and it was cold or cool. Not the cool of linoleum, but the cool of hardwood that had been resting all night in a house where the heat had been turned down or off, because it was, I want to say it was late spring or early summer, that time of year when you didn't need the furnace anymore. But the mornings still had a chill, a softness to them, a temperature that made you aware of your own skin. The hallway was dark. Not black, just dark. The kind of dark where your eyes find enough to work with after a moment. The pale rectangle of a door, the faint line of the baseboard, the not quite visible pattern of the wallpaper that you knew was there because you'd seen it 1,000 times in the light, small flowers, or small shapes that might have been flowers, repeated in rows that went all the way to the ceiling. You couldn't see the pattern now, but you knew it was there. The way you knew the bathroom was to the left, and the stairs were to the right. And the creak was in the third step from the top. The creak. I want to stay with the creak. Because on a Saturday morning when the house was sleeping, the creak was enormous. It was the loudest sound in the world. You'd put your foot on that step and the wood would speak, a long, slow groan that started under your heel and travelled the length of the board and seemed to fill the entire staircase, the entire hallway, the entire sleeping house. And you'd freeze. You'd stand there, one foot on the step, one foot still on the step above, and you'd hold your breath, and you'd listen. You'd listen for the sound of someone stirring, a mattress shifting, a voice, groggy and low, asking if someone was up. And the house would give you nothing, just silence, just the settling back. The creak would fade, absorbed by the walls and the carpet and the closed doors, and the house would be still again, and you'd move on. Down the next step. And the next. Slowly. Carefully. One hand on the banister that was smooth from years of hands, smooth the way river stones are smooth, the wood worn down to something almost soft, almost warm, even in the cool of the morning. Your hand slid along it as you descended, and the banister guided you down the way a hand on your back guides you through a dark room, not pushing, just there, just present. Just letting you know where the edge was, and the house around you as you came down the stairs. The house in the early morning. It had sounds, not the sounds of waking, not the sounds of people, but the sounds of the house itself. The small sounds that a house makes when it thinks no one is listening. A settling in the walls, a faint creak in the ceiling, the almost inaudible groan of wood and plaster and pipe adjusting to the temp temperature, expanding or contracting by fractions of fractions, movements so small they belong to the world of atoms and molecules, but that added up over the hours to sound. To the voice of the house. A low, scattered, intermittent murmur that you could only hear when everything else was quiet. When everyone else was asleep. When you were the only one awake, moving through the dim hallway at the bottom of the stairs, past the living room where the furniture sat in shadow. The couch, the armchair, the television with its blank grey screen, and toward the kitchen where the light was slightly different, slightly bluer, slightly more like morning. Not because you were doing anything wrong. You weren't. You were just a kid going downstairs. But because the stillness was something you didn't want to break. It was precious in a way you didn't have a word for. It was yours. This quiet house, this early hour, this grey light, it was yours in a way that nothing else was during the rest of the day, when the house was awake and full of voices and movement and the regular noise of people living together. Right now it was just you, and the house, and the clock. There it is again. You came into the kitchen, not through a door. I don't think there was a door, just a doorway. An opening in the wall where the hallway ended and the kitchen began, and you stood there for a moment, on the threshold. And the kitchen was different from the hallway. The air was different. It was cooler, or maybe it just felt cooler because the floor was different. Linoleum now instead of hardwood. And the linoleum had its own temperature, its own particular cool, smooth and faintly yielding under your bare feet, in a way that hardwood wasn't. Hardwood was firm. Hardwood was bone. Linoleum was something softer, something that gave just slightly under your weight, and the cool of it came up through the soles of your feet and into your ankles, and you felt it. You felt it the way you feel the first step into a lake. That small shock that isn't quite a shock. That gentle announcement that you've crossed from one thing into another. And the smell. The kitchen had a smell at that hour that it didn't have at any other hour. It was the smell of the night's absence. The smell of a room where no one had been cooking. No one had been making coffee. No one had been opening the refrigerator or running the tap or doing any of the things that gave the kitchen its daytime smells. What was left was something underneath all of those smells. The smell of the room itself. The wood of the cabinets. The faint, clean scent of the dish soap in its bottle by the sink. The ghost of last night's dinner. Not the dinner itself, but the memory of it. The way a room remembers a meal. The way a pillow remembers a head. Not the thing, but the impression of the thing, faint and warm and already fading. And the clock was the first thing you heard. Not the first thing you saw. The first thing you saw was the light, that thin, early grey-blue light that came through the window over the sink, and I'll come back to that. But the first thing you heard was the clock. On the wall, above the doorway, or beside the doorway, or across the room near the window. I can't remember exactly where it hung, but it doesn't matter, because the sound came from everywhere. In that quiet kitchen, in that quiet house, the clock didn't have a location. It had a presence. It was in the walls. It was in the floor. It was in the air itself, marking time that nobody was using, counting seconds that nobody was counting, ticking and ticking and ticking with a patience that was almost alive. Tick, 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 and each tick had two parts. I want to stay with this because it matters. Because the sound of that clock is the thing that brought me here tonight. Each tick had two parts, a hard part and a soft part. The hard part was the beginning, the click, the tiny mechanical moment when whatever was inside the clock caught and released. And the soft part was the resonance, the small hum that followed, the way the sound spread out from the click, the way a ripple spreads out from a pebble dropped in water. Click and hum. Click and hum. And between each one, a silence. Not a long silence, just long enough to notice. Just long enough for the kitchen to be absolutely still before the next tick came and stirred the air again. The clock face. I could see it from where I stood, or from where I sat, because at some point I sat down, I must have, at the kitchen table in the chair that was mine, the one nearest the window, and the clock face was round and white with black numbers, plain numbers, no Roman numerals, just the ordinary numbers that clocks had, 1 through 12, evenly spaced. And the hands were black too, thin and straight, and they moved so slowly you couldn't see them move. You could look at the minute hand, and it would be pointing at, say, the 7, and you could look away and look back, and it would still be pointing at the 7, and you'd think it hadn't moved, but it had. It had moved the smallest possible amount, an amount too small for your eyes to detect, but enough over time, over many ticks, to carry it from the 7 to the 8 and from the 8 to the 9. And the morning would pass that way, in increments too small to see, but large enough to feel. And the second hand was different. The second hand you could watch. It was thinner than the others, a fine red line, red, I think, or orange, something warm against the white face, and it swept in a smooth, continuous circle, not jumping from second to second the way some clocks do, but gliding, moving through the numbers in one unbroken motion, and watching it was like watching something breathe. Around and around, smooth and steady, the same speed always, the same pace, whether the kitchen was full or empty, whether the house was awake or sleeping, whether it was Saturday or Tuesday or the middle of July. The second hand didn't care what day it was. The second hand had one job, and it did it. And it would keep doing it, long after you left the kitchen, and long after you left the house, and long after you left that particular Saturday morning behind. But you hadn't left it yet. You were there. You were sitting at the table in the grey light, and the clock was ticking, and the house was sleeping, and the kitchen was yours. The table. Let me stay with the table. Because the table was where you sat. And it had a surface. And the surface had a temperature. And that matters. It was cool. Formica, probably, or something like it. That smooth, hard, slightly glossy material that kitchen tables were made of in those years, with a colour or a pattern that was, I want to say it was something between white and cream, with small flecks in it, gold or grey, a pattern that looked like nothing and looked like everything. A pattern that was so familiar it was invisible, the way the wallpaper in the hallway was invisible, the way the linoleum on the floor was invisible. You didn't see these things. You lived on them. You ate on them. You put your elbows on them and your forehead on them and your cereal bowl on them every morning, and they were just there, part of the house, part of the architecture of ordinary life. And the chair. The chair had a vinyl cushion, I think, or maybe it was just the metal frame with a padded seat, chrome legs, slightly cold if you touched them, slightly hollow if you tapped them with your fingernail. And the chair made a small sound when you sat down, a creak or a shift, the metal adjusting to your weight, and then it was still. And you were still, and the kitchen was still, and there was nothing between you and the morning except the table and the clock and the light that was coming slowly through the window over the sink. And the surface was cool under your forearms, that early morning cool, the cool of a thing that has been resting in a quiet room all night, untouched, absorbing the temperature of the dark hours, and now your arms were on it, and your warmth was going into it, and its cool was going into you, and there was an exchange happening, slow and small and unnoticed, the way all the exchanges in a house are slow and small and unnoticed. The heat from the stove going into the air, the light from the window going into the floor, the sound from the clock going into the walls. Everything giving, everything receiving, everything finding its level, its balance, its quiet agreement with everything else. The light was changing, slowly. So slowly you couldn't watch it change, the way you couldn't watch the minute hand move. But it was changing. The grey was becoming less grey. There was something in it now, a warmth, a colour, a faint gold or pink that wasn't there before, that was coming from outside, from the sky above the houses across the street, from the place where the sun was doing its slow work of arriving. The kitchen was still dim. The light hadn't reached the room yet, not really. It was still in the window, still in the glass, still making its way through the curtain, a thin curtain, I think, something light, something that let the light in without letting the outside in, the way the screen door let the air in without letting the insects in. And the kitchen was in that in-between state, that not dark, not light state that belongs only to the very early morning. The state where everything is soft and undefined and waiting. Waiting. Not for anything specific, not anxiously, just waiting. The way a room waits before someone turns on a lamp. The way a stage waits before someone walks onto it. The kitchen was waiting, and I was in it, and the clock was ticking, and the house was sleeping, and the light was coming, and everything was still. Everything was as still as it would ever be. And if I held my breath, if I stopped breathing for a moment and let the clock be the only thing, I could hear the house. Not the sounds I mentioned before, not the settling and the creaking, but something even quieter. Something underneath. The refrigerator, maybe, which I hadn't noticed yet because it was so constant, so low, so woven into the fabric of the kitchen's silence that it wasn't a sound so much as a texture. A hum, a vibration more felt than heard, coming up through the floor and into the chair and into my body. And it was the heartbeat of the kitchen, the way the clock was the breath of the kitchen, and together they made the room alive. Not awake, alive. There is a difference. The room was alive and not awake, the way a sleeping person is alive and not awake, and I was sitting in it, and I was part of it, and the morning was beginning, and I was there for it. I was the one awake. I was the witness to this particular moment of the house's life, this moment when it was empty of everything except itself, its floors and walls and windows, and the smell of last night's dinner still faintly in the air, and the cool of the table under my arms, and the tick of the clock measuring out the morning in small, precise, unhurried intervals that asked nothing of me. That needed nothing from me. That simply went on, the way the streetlights outside this studio go on, patient and faithful and unaware of anything except the next tick, the next second, the next small movement of the red hand around the white face in the quiet kitchen in the sleeping house on the Saturday morning that no one else remembers because no one else was there. But I was there, and the clock was ticking, and I can still hear it. Not the actual sound, but the shape of it, the weight of it. The way it sat in the silence like a heartbeat sits in a body, not drawing attention to itself, not asking to be noticed. Just going on, just keeping time. Just doing its quiet, steady, faithful work in a kitchen where a boy sat alone at a table in the early light and wanted for nothing, needed nothing, was simply there. Inside the morning, inside the stillness, inside the sound of a clock that is still ticking somewhere in some kitchen, in some house, on some Saturday that hasn't ended yet, because the memory of it is a room you can still walk into if you close your eyes and listen. Close your eyes. Listen, I've got a record to put on for you now. Something that sounds like that kitchen. Something slow and bare and steady. Something with space in it. The way that morning had space, the way that kitchen had space, the way the silence between the ticks had space for everything you didn't need to think, and everything you didn't need to do, and everything that was simply quietly enough. Here it comes. That was a quiet one, wasn't it? The kind of record where the piano does most of the work and everything else just leans against it, gently, the way you lean against a wall when you're tired, not falling, just resting, just letting something solid take a little of the weight. I like those. I like the ones that leave room for the silence to sit next to the sound, room for the space between the notes to be as much a part of the song as the notes themselves. It's 1:30, or close to it. I stopped checking the clock a while ago, which is funny because I've been talking about a clock all night. The one on the kitchen wall. The one with the white face and the black hands and the red second hand that swept around and around in that smooth, unbroken circle. I can still hear it. Or I think I can. Maybe what I'm hearing is the clock in this studio, which has its own tick, its own rhythm, its own way of measuring the night in small, even portions. They might be the same clock, for all I know. They might all be the same clock. Every clock that's ever ticked in every quiet room at every early hour, all of them keeping the same time, all of them saying the same thing, which is, there's no hurry. There's no hurry. There's no hurry at all. I was in the kitchen, Saturday morning, the house still sleeping, the light coming through the window over the sink, grey and blue and slowly warming, the table cool under my forearms, the clock ticking, and I was sitting there, and at some point, I don't know how long I sat, it could have been 5 minutes or 15. Time didn't work the same way on those mornings. Time was looser, softer, more like water than like a line. At some point, I got hungry. Or not hungry exactly. My body just knew what came next. Saturday morning, kitchen table, the next thing was cereal. The next thing was always cereal. The cabinet, the cereal was in the cabinet. Upper cabinet, to the left of the sink or to the right, somewhere up there above the counter behind a wooden door with a small handle, a metal handle, the kind you hooked your fingers under and pulled. And the door would open with a sound. Not a creak, not a squeak, but something in between. A soft, wooden, slightly sticky sound, the sound of a seal breaking, of painted wood separating from painted wood after being closed all night. And behind the door, the shelves. And on the shelves, the boxes. The boxes. I want to stay with the boxes, because the cereal boxes on a kitchen shelf were a particular thing, a particular arrangement, a particular site that belonged to that era, the way the clock on the wall belonged to it and the linoleum on the floor belonged to it. They stood in a row, tall ones and short ones, some nearly full, heavy and solid when you took them down, some nearly empty, light, almost weightless, with the cereal inside shifting and rattling when you tilted them, a dry, papery, whispering sound, like sand in a jar, like leaves in a gutter, like something small and loose finding its way from one end of the box to the other. And the colours. The boxes were bright. Even in the dim light of that early kitchen, even in the grey-blue almost morning, the boxes were the most colourful things in the room. Reds and yellows and oranges, the colours of things meant to be seen, meant to be chosen, meant to catch a child's eye in a grocery store aisle. And here they were on the shelf, those loud, cheerful, wide-awake colours, sitting in a kitchen that was none of those things, a kitchen that was quiet and dim and cool and still. And the contrast was something you didn't think about at the time, but that you notice now, remembering. The boxes didn't belong to the morning. They belonged to a different world. The world of the store, the world of the commercial, the world of bright lights and full carts, and the particular overwhelming aliveness of a grocery aisle on a weekday afternoon. But here, on the shelf, in the quiet, they were just boxes, just cardboard. Just containers for the thing you were about to eat, alone at the table, in the grey light, with the clock ticking. You chose one. You reached up and your fingers closed around the top of the box and you brought it down, and the weight of it told you something. How much was left? How many mornings were still in it? How many more times you'd reach for this particular box before it was empty and replaced by another one, the same brand or a different brand, standing in the same spot on the same shelf. The box had a waxy feel to it, that coated cardboard that cereal boxes were made of, slightly slick, slightly smooth, with a surface that your fingerprints didn't stick to the way they stuck to regular paper. And the printing on the front. The mascot, the name, the picture of the cereal in a bowl that looked nothing like what the cereal actually looked like in your bowl, but that didn't matter, had never mattered, because you weren't eating the picture, you were eating the thing. And the thing was fine, the thing was good, the thing was what you wanted. You set the box on the table, and the box stood there, tall and bright and still, like a small building on the Formica landscape, and the kitchen was quiet around it, and the clock was ticking, and the light was still coming through the window, a little warmer now, a little more gold, and the box threw a shadow, a small faint shadow on the table surface, angled and long in the low light, and the shadow moved as the light moved, so slowly you couldn't see it move. But it moved, the way the minute hand moved, the way the morning moved, the way everything in that kitchen moved, gradually, patiently, without any interest in arriving. And for a moment, before getting the bowl, you just looked at the kitchen. You just sat there and looked at it the way you wouldn't look at it on any other morning. Because on every other morning, there would be voices and footsteps, and the sound of water running, and the toaster clicking down, and the whole busy machinery of a weekday getting started. But this morning, there was none of that. There was just the room as itself. The countertop, with its small collection of things. The toaster, unplugged perhaps, or perhaps not. Its chrome sides reflecting the faint light from the window. The dish soap by the sink, that plastic bottle with the coloured liquid inside, amber or green, and the squeeze top that always had a small crust of dried soap around it. The paper towel roll on its stand, mounted under the cabinet or standing upright near the stove. The salt and pepper shakers, small glass bodies, metal caps, one always slightly fuller than the other. All of these things sitting in their places, exactly where they'd been left the night before, untouched, unmoved, undisturbed. As though someone had arranged a still life and left the room, as though the kitchen were a painting of itself. And the cabinets above the counter, their doors all closed, their contents hidden. The plates, the glasses, the mugs hanging from hooks, the cans and boxes and jars of things that made up the pantry of a household, all of it dark behind the wood, all of it resting, all of it waiting the way you were waiting, the way the kitchen was waiting for the day to begin. But not yet. Not yet. The bowl. The bowl was in the lower cabinet, or in the dish rack by the sink, dry from last night, clean, sitting upside down on the rubber mat with the ridges. You took it and it was cool, everything was cool, everything in that kitchen had spent the night at the same temperature, the same quiet, resting coolness, and you set it on the table next to the box. And it made a small sound, a dull ceramic tap, the sound of a bowl meeting a Formica table, and the sound was absorbed by the kitchen, the way all sounds were absorbed by the kitchen at that hour. Taken in, held briefly, released. Nothing echoed. Nothing lingered. The room was too soft for echoes, too full of curtains and cabinets, and the padded chairs and the air itself, which was thick with quiet, heavy with it, the way air is heavy before a rain. And the pouring of the cereal from the box into the bowl. I want to stay with this, because it was a sound, and in that kitchen at that hour, every sound was an event. You opened the top of the box, the flaps, the inner bag, that waxed paper bag that crinkled when you pulled it open. A crinkling that was sharp and loud in the still air, almost startling, the way any sudden sound is startling when you've been sitting in silence for a long time. And then you tilted the box and the cereal began to fall. And the sound of dry cereal falling into an empty ceramic bowl. It was, I want to get this right, it was a light sound. A rattling, a pattering, like small dry rain on a tin roof, but gentler, softer, more contained. Each piece hitting the bottom of the bowl and bouncing slightly, skittering, settling. And as the bowl filled, the sound changed. It got softer, because the cereal was no longer hitting ceramic, it was hitting other cereal, landing on a cushion of itself. And the sound went from a rattle to a hiss, from a patter to a whisper. And by the time the bowl was full, or full enough, you never filled it all the way, you left room for the milk. The sound was barely there. Just a soft shifting, a settling. The cereal arranging itself in the bowl, the way sand arranges itself in a jar, finding its angle, its rest, its stillness. And then the milk. The refrigerator. I have to go to the refrigerator now because that's where the milk was. And the refrigerator was its own world in that kitchen. It stood against the wall, large, white, humming. Humming that low, constant hum I mentioned before, the one that was so woven into the silence that you only noticed it when it stopped. And it did stop sometimes. The compressor would cycle off and the hum would cease, and the kitchen would become even quieter, impossibly quieter, as though the refrigerator had been holding a note and had let it go. And the absence of the hum was a sound in itself, a negative sound, a space where something had been and now wasn't. And then, after a minute or 2 or 5, the compressor would kick back on. Not with a bang, not with a start, but with a slow gathering, a low vibration that built from nothing to something, from silence to hum, and the kitchen would settle back into its familiar frequency, its baseline, its resting tone. You opened the refrigerator door, and the light came on inside. That small yellow light, that bulb in its cage behind the plastic cover, and it lit up the interior, the shelves, the jars, the covered dishes, the butter dish, the bottles along the door. And for a moment, standing in front of the open refrigerator, you were bathed in that light. Cold light. Not cold in color. It was warm, it was yellow. It was the color of the kitchen light that hadn't been turned on yet, but cold in temperature. Because the air from the refrigerator came out with it. A breath of cold that touched your face and your arms and your bare legs, and it was the coldest thing in the house at that hour, that small cloud of refrigerator air. And it smelled like everything inside. Like all the things on the shelves. Their smells mingled and chilled and compressed into one smell. That was the smell of the refrigerator, the smell of cold food, the smell of preservation, of things being kept, being held, being saved for later. The milk. The milk was in a carton or a jug, a glass jug or a plastic jug, I can't remember, but it was heavy, full, or mostly full. You took it out with both hands, or maybe one hand gripping the handle, and you pushed the refrigerator door closed with your hip or your elbow, and the door closed with a soft, heavy, sealed sound, the sound of rubber gaskets meeting, of the cold being locked back in. And the light inside went off, and the kitchen was dim again, and the hum went on. You brought the milk to the table. You poured. And the sound of milk pouring into a bowl of cereal was different from the sound of cereal pouring into an empty bowl. It was thicker, quieter, a liquid sound, a sound with weight to it, a sound like a small stream finding its way through stones. The milk moved around the cereal, between the pieces, under them, lifting them slightly, and the cereal shifted and floated and rearranged itself, and there were small sounds, tiny clicks and taps as pieces bumped against each other, bumped against the side of the bowl. And then the pouring stopped, and the milk settled, and the cereal settled, and the bowl was full of this still, private breakfast that no one had made for you, that you'd made for yourself, alone, in the quiet, in the almost dark, in the kitchen with the clock and the hum and the light that was slowly, slowly arriving. And you sat, and you ate, slowly. There was no reason to eat fast. No one was going to tell you to hurry up. No one was going to take the bowl away. No one was going to say it was time to go. The morning belonged to you, the way the kitchen belonged to you at this hour, completely and without condition, and you could eat as slowly as you wanted, and the linoleum under the table. Your feet were on it, bare feet still, the same bare feet that had felt the hardwood in the hallway and the cool of the kitchen threshold, and the linoleum had warmed slightly where your feet rested, the way the formica had warmed slightly where your arms rested, your body slowly, quietly changing the temperature of everything it touched, leaving its small mark on the surfaces of the room, the way the light from the window was leaving its small mark, the way the clock was leaving its small mark tick by tick on the silence. and the sound of eating cereal in a quiet kitchen. The crunch, the soft crunch that seemed enormous inside your own head, but that barely travelled past the table, barely reached the walls, barely existed outside the small circle of you and the bowl and the spoon. That sound was the only sound you were making. The only evidence that anyone was awake. The only thing that said, someone is here. Someone is alive in this house at this hour, doing this small, ordinary, unnecessary thing, eating cereal on a Saturday morning when there's no school to get to, no bus to catch, no reason to be awake except that you are. Except that the light woke you, or the silence woke you, or nothing woke you. You just rose up out of sleep like a bubble rises up out of water, slowly, naturally, without any effort at all. The spoon clinked against the bowl, a small, high, clear sound, ceramic and metal, meeting and parting, meeting and parting. And the milk was cold on your tongue, sweet with the sugar from the cereal, and the cereal was going soft at the edges, the way cereal does when it sits in milk, and the outside dissolving, the inside still holding its shape, still crunching when you bit down. And there was a pleasure in that, in the texture of it, in the contrast between the soft and the hard, the wet and the dry. A pleasure that was entirely physical, entirely of the body. The kind of pleasure that asks nothing of the mind, that doesn't need a thought or a word, that is just the mouth doing what the mouth does, and the tongue doing what the tongue does, and the morning going on, tick by tick, spoonful by spoonful, in no hurry at all. And the box stood on the table, tall and bright. Its shadow longer now or shorter, depending on the light, which was still changing, still warming, still making its slow way from the window into the room. And the clock ticked, and the refrigerator hummed, and the house slept. And the bowl was almost empty now. The last few pieces of cereal floating in the milk at the bottom, the milk no longer white but tinted with the colour of the cereal, the sugar dissolved into it, sweetening it, and you'd lift the bowl, maybe if no one was watching, and no one was, and drink the rest, the sweet milk, cold and thin and good, and the bowl would be empty, and you'd set it back on the table, and the spoon would rest in it at an angle, leaning against the side, and the bowl would sit there, used, finished, with a small ring of milk drying on the inside, and you would have no reason to move, no reason to get up, no reason to do anything, except sit in the chair in the quiet kitchen and listen to the clock and watch the light and feel the linoleum under your feet and the table under your arms and the morning around you, holding you, the way a cupped hand holds water, gently, openly, without gripping, without squeezing, just holding. And you ate your cereal, alone, at the table in the chair that was yours, and the morning was still yours, still private, still that rare and particular thing. A Saturday with no one awake, no one asking, no one needing, no one calling your name from the hallway or the top of the stairs. Just you, just the bowl, just the spoon, just the clock. I'm sitting here in the studio, and the board is humming, and the lights are steady, and the city outside the window is doing that thing it does at this hour, just existing, just being there, not performing, not presenting itself, just resting in its own amber light, the way that kitchen rested in its own grey light all those years ago. And I'm thinking about cereal, about the weight of a milk jug in a small hand, about the sound of dry things falling into an empty bowl, about the way a kitchen smells when no one has been in it for hours and the air has settled, and the only warmth is the warmth you brought with you, down the stairs, across the hallway, into the room where the clock was keeping time for no one. I've got another record for you. Something with space in it. Something with room between the notes for the hum of a refrigerator, for the tick of a clock, for the small sound of a spoon against a bowl in a kitchen where the light is just beginning and the house is still asleep and the morning is an unlocked room that no one else has entered yet. Here it comes. Let it play. Let the morning go on. There it goes, that last record. The way the horn held its final note and then let it go. Not dropping it, not cutting it off, just letting it go. The way you let a breath go when you've been holding it for a long time, slowly all the way out. until there's nothing left and the air is just air again. I like that. I like when a song knows how to leave a room. The city outside the studio window is deep in its sleep now. It's past too, well past. And the street has that look it gets when the night has been going on for so long it's forgotten it's the night. When the dark has settled in so completely it feels permanent. Like this is just what the world is now. This is just how things are. Amber lights and wet pavement and the traffic signal at the corner going through its colours for nobody. Green and yellow and red, green and yellow and red, patient as a heartbeat, faithful as a clock. A clock. There's that word again. I keep coming back to it. I keep coming back to that kitchen, to that Saturday morning, to the boy at the table with the empty cereal bowl and the clock on the wall and the house sleeping around him like a held breath. The bowl was empty. The cereal was gone. The milk was gone. Drunk from the bowl, that last sweet mouthful, cold and sugary, the best part, the secret reward for finishing. And the spoon rested in the bowl at an angle, and the box stood on the table throwing its long, faint shadow, and there was nothing to do. Nothing at all. The morning had no next step. The morning had no agenda, no list, no sequence of things that needed to happen in a particular order. It was Saturday, and the house was asleep, and the cereal was eaten, and the clock was ticking, and you were free. Not free in the way that word usually means. Not free from something, not released from some obligation, but free in a simpler way, a more complete way. Free the way air is free. Free the way the light coming through the window was free. Going wherever it went, landing wherever it landed, asking nobody's permission. And that's when you looked at the window, really looked at it. Because you'd been in the kitchen for a while now, and the light had been coming through the window all that time. But you hadn't looked at it. You'd looked at the table, the box, the bowl, the clock, the cabinet, the refrigerator. The window had been a source of light, not a thing in itself. But now, with nothing else to do, with the bowl empty and the morning open, you turned in your chair, or you got up and walked to the sink, and you looked. The window over the sink. Let me stay here for a while, because this window was the eye of the kitchen, and what it showed you on a Saturday morning before the rest of the house woke up was something you didn't get to see at any other time, from any other angle, in any other frame of mind. It was a simple window. Double hung, I think. 2 panes, one on top of the other, with a latch in the middle, and a sill at the bottom, wide enough to hold a small pot with something growing in it. An herb, maybe, or a plant that someone had been meaning to repot for months but hadn't. And it lived there, on the sill, in its too small pot, leaning toward the light the way plants do, reaching for whatever the glass would let through. And the glass itself. It was old glass, or it seemed old, not perfectly flat, not perfectly clear, with a slight waviness to it, a slight distortion that you didn't notice when you were looking through it at something specific, but that you noticed now, looking at it, at the glass itself, the way you might notice the frame of a painting for the first time after looking at the painting 100 times. And there was condensation. A fine mist on the inside of the lower pane, where the cool of the night outside had met the warmth of the kitchen air. Even the small warmth of one boy and one bowl of cereal and one open refrigerator door had been enough to make the glass sweat, just barely. Just a faint clouding at the bottom and the corners, and you could have drawn in it with your finger. A line, a letter, a small mark on the glass that would fade as the morning warmed. But you didn't. You just noticed it was there. You noticed the way the condensation softened the view at the edges, the way it made the world outside slightly blurred at the bottom and clear at the top, so that the ground was a dream and the sky was real, or the other way around. It was hard to tell which was which on a morning like that, when everything was in between, when nothing had quite decided what it was going to be. And through the glass, through the waviness and the condensation and the thin curtain that hung on a rod across the top, a curtain that was pulled to the side now, bunched and gathered on its rings, through all of that, the backyard, your backyard. The same backyard it always was. The same patch of grass and fence and sky that you saw every day, but different. Different because of the hour. Different because of the light. Different because you were the only one looking. The grass was wet. That was the first thing. The grass was covered in dew, and the dew caught the early light. The light that was no longer grey now, but gold. A pale, thin, almost transparent gold. The gold of a morning that hasn't fully committed to being morning yet. And the dew turned that light into something you could almost touch. Each blade of grass held its own drop, its own small bead of water, and each bead was a tiny lens, a tiny mirror, catching the gold and holding it and giving it back. So the entire yard seemed to glitter. Not sparkle. That's too sharp a word, too bright, too much like something that wants to be noticed. The yard glittered the way quiet things glitter. The way a river glitters when you see it from a distance. The way a spider web glitters when the light hits it at the right angle. It was subtle. It was almost not there. It was the kind of beauty that exists only when no one is trying to make it beautiful. When no one has arranged it or planned it or even hoped for it. It just was. The dew was on the grass and the light was on the dew and the yard was glittering and no one was watching except you, standing at the sink, looking through the wavy glass at this ordinary, unremarkable, perfect thing. The fence. At the back of the yard, the fence. Wooden. A simple wooden fence, the kind that was everywhere in those neighborhoods. Vertical boards, slightly spaced with pointed tops, and a horizontal rail along the top and another along the bottom, and the wood was grey. Not painted grey. Grey from age, from weather, from years of rain and sun and snow, and the slow, patient work of air on wood, turning it from whatever colour it had been when it was new, brown or honey, or the pale yellow of fresh-cut pine, into this grey, this silver grey, this colour that was the colour of time itself made visible on the surface of a thing. And the fence had dew on it too. On the top of each board, along the flat surface, the water sat in small beads and in thin films, and it caught the light differently from the grass, not glittering but glowing, a dull, wet sheen that made the grey wood look darker, richer, more present. The fence looked more like a fence on a dewy morning than it did at any other time. It looked more like itself. The way everything looks more like itself when it's wet. The colours deeper, the textures sharper, the edges more defined. Rain does this too. Dew does it more gently. Dew does it without asking you to notice. Dew does it in the early morning, before anyone is watching, the way a stagehand sets the stage before the audience arrives, quietly, carefully, making everything ready, making everything right, and then stepping back unseen, so that when the light comes up, the world looks the way it's supposed to look. And no one knows the work that went into it. And beyond the fence. Beyond the fence, the neighbour's yard. You couldn't see much, just the tops of things. The top of a swing set, the crossbar and the chains hanging still in the windless air, the seats empty, the whole structure motionless in a way that seemed to be waiting. The way the kitchen was waiting, the way the house was waiting, the way everything on a Saturday morning before the world woke up seemed to be waiting for something that was coming but hadn't arrived yet and was in no hurry to arrive. Beyond the swing set, the roof of the neighbour's house. Just the peak of it, visible above the fence with its shingles and its gutter and its chimney. And the chimney had no smoke. It was late spring or early summer, remember. No fires, no furnaces, just the chimney standing there open to the sky, its dark mouth pointed upward at the clouds. The clouds. There were clouds. Not many. Not the heavy kind. Not the kind that meant rain, but the soft kind, the high kind, the kind that looked like they'd been pulled apart by slow hands, stretched thin and laid across the blue in long, wispy streaks that glowed pink on their undersides and white on their tops. The sky behind them was that early morning blue, not the deep blue of noon, not the dark blue of late afternoon, but a pale, clean, washed blue, the blue of something that has just been made, something fresh, something that hasn't been used yet. And the clouds moved through it so slowly they barely moved at all. You could watch a cloud and not see it move. You could look away and look back, and it would be in the same place, or almost the same place, the way the minute hand was in the same place, or almost. Everything in that morning moved at the speed of almost. Almost the same. Almost still. Almost, but not quite, stopped. A bird. There was a bird somewhere. You couldn't see it. Or maybe you could. Maybe it was on the fence or on the power line that ran behind the yard. That black wire strung between wooden poles, sagging slightly in the middle, the way all power lines sag. That gentle curve, that catenary, the shape that gravity makes when it pulls on something flexible, strung between two fixed points. Maybe the bird was there, on the wire, and you could see it through the window, a small dark shape against the pale sky, the pale clouds. Or maybe you couldn't see it. Maybe you could only hear it. One bird, one voice, a small, clear, repeated phrase. 2 notes, or 3 or 4, coming from somewhere in the yard or beyond the yard, sharp and bright and unself-conscious in the way that birdsong is, the bird not performing, not singing for anyone, just singing because the morning was there, and the light was there, and the air was there, and singing was what you did when those things were true. And the sound came through the window, through the glass, which was closed, or through the gap at the top, if the window was cracked open an inch. And it might have been open just that much, just enough to let the morning air in, and the morning air was cooler than the kitchen air, and it carried the bird's song with it. And the song entered the kitchen and mixed with the tick of the clock, and the two sounds, the mechanical and the living, the measured and the free, existed side by side in the warm air of the room, and neither one disturbed the other. The clock ticked and the bird sang and the kitchen held them both. And the smell. If the window was cracked, the smell came in too. The smell of the morning, the smell of dew on grass, the smell of earth that had been damp all night and was beginning to warm. A green smell, a wet smell. A smell that was the opposite of the kitchen smell. The kitchen smelled like the inside of something, like cabinets and dish soap and the ghost of dinner and the cold breath of the refrigerator. The outside smelled like the outside of everything. Like open air and open ground and the sky itself, which doesn't have a smell but which you associate with a feeling of space, of room, of the world going on in every direction. Past the fence and the neighbor's yard and the rooftops and the treetops, all the way to the horizon, which you couldn't see from the kitchen window but which you knew was there, far away, holding the edge of everything. And the cool air that came in through that crack, that 1 inch of open window. It was a different cool from the cool of the linoleum or the cool of the formica table. Those were the cool of things, of surfaces, of materials, of the solid world. This was the cool of air, of the morning itself, and it moved. It moved across your face, across your arms if they were bare, and it carried the dew smell and the green smell and the bird's voice. And it was the first piece of outside that had entered the kitchen that morning, the first ambassador from the yard and the sky and the world beyond the glass. And it mixed with the warm kitchen air, the stale, still, overnight air that had been sitting in the room since the last person left it the night before. And the two airs, the warm inside air and the cool outside air, met somewhere near the window, somewhere above the sink, and you could almost feel the place where they touched, the thin, invisible border between the world of the house and the world of the yard, between the clock's world and the bird's world, between the still and the stirring. And standing there at the window, or leaning against the counter, your hip against the edge, your hands resting on the cool lip of the sink, you were in both worlds at once, inside and outside, the kitchen and the yard, the clock and the bird. You were the place where they met, the way the window was the place where they met, and you didn't have to choose. That was the gift of the morning. You didn't have to choose between staying in and going out, between the warm and the cool, between the still and the moving. You could be in the kitchen and be in the yard at the same time. You could hear the clock and hear the bird at the same time. You could feel the linoleum under your feet and smell the dew on the grass at the same time. The window let you have it all. The window was generous that way. And you stood at the window, or you sat back down at the table and looked at the window from across the room, and the backyard was there, framed in the window, hung on the kitchen wall like a painting that changed so slowly it appeared not to change at all. The dew glittering, the fence glowing, the clouds drifting, the birds singing, the swing set waiting. And you were inside, on the kitchen side of the glass, in the warm, still, clock-ticking air, and the outside was outside, and you didn't go out. Not yet. There was no reason to go out. There was no reason to do anything. The window was enough. The looking was enough. The sitting and the looking and the listening and the feeling of the cool linoleum under your feet and the warm air around your shoulders and the morning coming in through the glass, gently, gradually, the way all things come when they are not rushed, when they are not called, when they are simply allowed to arrive. The sink below the window. Let me come down from the sky and back to the kitchen for a moment. The sink. It was there directly below the window, and it was empty, or nearly empty. Maybe a glass from last night, a single glass standing in the basin, or a spoon left behind, resting on the stainless steel. The stainless steel of the sink caught the light from the window and held it. A cool silver light, different from the warm gold of the dew on the grass, more like the light of the moon than the light of the sun, reflected and quiet and contained. And the faucet. The faucet rose from the back of the sink, curved chrome, with its two handles, hot and cold, and a single drop of water hanging from the tip of the spout, hanging there, round and perfect and trembling slightly, catching the light in its small body, holding it, and you could watch that drop and wait for it to fall, and it wouldn't fall. It would hang there. It would hang there for what seemed like forever, trembling, gathering, building itself one molecule at a time, until its weight was more than the surface tension could hold, and it would fall. A tiny sound, a tap, a single note on the stainless steel, and then silence, and then the slow gathering would begin again. A new drop forming, a new weight building, a new weight, the drip and the tick, the faucet and the clock. Two rhythms in the kitchen, neither one matching the other, neither one aware of the other, each one keeping its own time in its own way, the clock steady and mechanical and even, the faucet irregular and organic and unpredictable, and together they made a kind of music. Not music anyone would choose to listen to, not music anyone would record or remember, but music in the truest sense. Two sounds in a space, overlapping, creating a pattern that was always changing and never repeating, and you were the only audience, the only one in the room, the only one awake in the house. And the performance went on, the clock and the faucet, the tick and the drip, measured out in the grey-gold light of a Saturday morning that was still new, still fresh, still untouched by anything but your presence, and the presence of the light and the slow, steady, unasked-for gift of time. I'm sitting here in the studio, and I realize I've been staring out my own window. This one. The one with the city behind it, the wet street, the amber lights. I've been looking through it the way I used to look through that kitchen window. Not at anything, just through, just letting the eyes rest on whatever is there. The distance, the quiet shapes, the way light moves on surfaces when the world is still. I've got a record for you. Something that sounds like looking through glass. Something with that quality, that gentle separation between you and the thing you're seeing. That thin, clear, almost invisible barrier that lets the light through and the sound through and the smell through, but keeps you where you are, inside, warm, resting, watching the world do its slow, beautiful, unwitnessed work on the other side. Here it comes. Let it through. That one stayed a while, didn't it? The way it moved, if you can call it moving, it barely moved, it hovered. It hung in the air the way that drop of water hung from the faucet, trembling, gathering, not quite ready to fall. And then it fell. And now we're here, in the quiet after, in the space where the needle has lifted and the groove is done, and the studio is just the studio again. The hum, the lights, the window, the city. It's late now. The deepest part. The part of the night where even saying the time out loud would feel like too much information. Like telling someone the name of a color when they're already looking at it. You don't need the number. You can feel what time it is. It's the time when the body stops tracking and the mind stops counting. And the only thing keeping time is the thing that's always keeping time, underneath everything. The heart. The breath, the slow pull of the world through its own dark hours. I've been in that kitchen all night. That Saturday kitchen. The clock and the cereal and the window and the dew on the grass and the birds singing from the fence or the wire and the faucet dripping its slow, patient drip onto the stainless steel. And I've been alone in it. The way I was alone in it then. The only one awake. The only one downstairs. The only one sitting in the grey gold light with an empty bowl and a full morning and nothing to do and nowhere to be. And it was perfect. It was as perfect as anything I've ever been inside of, before or since. But the thing about a Saturday morning, the thing about that particular kind of stillness, that before the house wakes stillness, is that it ends. Not sharply. Not the way an alarm ends a weekday morning, cutting through the dark like a blade, yanking you out of wherever you were and into the bright, hard fact of a schedule. No. A Saturday morning ends the way a candle goes out when the wax is spent. Slowly. The flame gets smaller, the light gets softer, the warmth withdraws into a smaller and smaller circle, and then it's gone, and you can still smell it. The ghost of the flame, the memory of the warmth. But the thing itself is finished. It started with a sound. The first sound from upstairs. And I want to stay with this. Because the first sound from upstairs on a Saturday morning was a particular kind of event. Not a big event, not a dramatic one, but an event the way the first drop of rain is an event. The way the first note of a song is an event. It changed everything that came after it. Not by being loud, not by being important, just by being the first. And I don't remember what it was. I don't remember the specific sound. It could have been a floorboard. It could have been the creak of a bed spring, the particular groan that a mattress makes when someone shifts in their sleep, when the body rolls from one side to the other and the springs adjust and the frame accepts the new distribution of weight. It could have been a cough, a single, muffled, barely there cough from behind a closed door, the kind of cough that comes from a throat just waking up, dry from the night, clearing itself the way a car engine clears itself on a cold morning, roughly, reluctantly, with effort. Or it could have been nothing identifiable at all, just a change in the quality of the silence upstairs, a shift in the texture of it, as though the air above the ceiling had moved, had been disturbed by something, by someone, by the first stirring of a body coming up out of sleep like a fish coming up out of deep water, slowly, slowly approaching the surface but not breaking it, not yet. Whatever it was, you heard it. Sitting in the kitchen. Sitting at the table with the empty bowl and the ticking clock and the dripping faucet and the window full of morning. You heard it, and something in you changed. Not much, not visibly, but something. A small tightening, a small awareness. The way a deer lifts its head in a field, not startled, not frightened, just aware. Alert to something new in the air, something that wasn't there a moment ago. The awareness that you were no longer the only one. That the house was no longer entirely yours. That somewhere above you, behind a door, beneath a blanket, someone was beginning the long, slow process of waking up. And the process, once started, could not be stopped, could not be reversed, any more than the light coming through the window could be reversed. It was coming. The morning was coming. The real morning, the shared morning, the morning with voices and footsteps and the kitchen light switched on and the radio turned to its station and the whole noisy, ordinary, populated business of a Saturday in a house full of people. But not yet. Not quite yet. Because waking up takes time. Waking up is not a moment. It's a journey, a slow migration from one country to another, from the country of sleep to the country of awake, and the border between them is wide and blurry and full of small delays. The person upstairs was in that border now, in the in-between. They'd moved, they'd coughed, they'd shifted the springs, but they hadn't gotten up. They hadn't put their feet on the floor. They were still in the bed, still under the covers, still in that warm, heavy, reluctant place where the body knows it's supposed to get up but hasn't agreed to it yet. Where the mind is surfacing but hasn't broken through. Where the pillow still has a claim on you and the blanket still has a claim on you and the dream you were having, whatever it was, it's already fading, already dissolving like fog in sun. The dream still has a faint, weak, loosening claim on you. And so you sat, and you waited, not anxiously, not sadly, just waiting. The way you'd been waiting all morning, the way the kitchen had been waiting, the way the clock had been waiting, tick by tick, for nothing in particular, for nothing at all. You sat and you listened, and the house above you was making its slow transition, and you could hear it. Not the person, not the footsteps, not the voice, not yet. But the house. The house changing registers. The house moving from its deep night frequency to its early morning frequency. The way an orchestra tunes before a performance. Each instrument finding its note, not playing yet, not performing yet, just warming up, just getting ready, just easing into the idea of sound. The pipes. I want to stay with the pipes. Because the pipes were the next thing. Not right away, maybe 10 minutes after the first sound, maybe 15, maybe longer. Time was still doing its loose, watery Saturday thing. But at some point the pipe spoke. Somewhere inside the walls of the house, behind the plaster and the studs and the insulation, in the dark spaces that no one sees and no one thinks about, the pipes carried a sound. Water moving. Someone upstairs had turned on a faucet, the bathroom faucet, probably, and the water was running. And the pipes were carrying the vibration of that water down through the walls and into the kitchen, and you could hear it, a low, thrumming sound. A hum, but not the refrigerator's hum, a different hum, a hum with movement in it, a hum that was going somewhere, that had a beginning and would have an end, that meant something was happening that had not been happening a moment before. And the sound was in the walls. That's the thing. It was inside the house the way blood is inside a body, flowing through channels you can't see, carrying something essential from one place to another, making the whole structure alive. The pipes hummed and the walls carried the hum, and the hum reached the kitchen and mixed with the tick of the clock and the drip of the faucet. And now there were 3 sounds, 3 rhythms, 3 layers, and the kitchen was fuller than it had been. Not louder, fuller. The way a chord is fuller than a single note. The way a room with 2 people in it is fuller than a room with 1, even if neither of them is speaking. And the water stopped. The faucet upstairs was turned off. The pipes went quiet. And the kitchen was quiet again, but not the same quiet. It was a different quiet, a quiet that knew it was temporary, a quiet that had heard what was coming and was making room for it. The way a town makes room for a parade it knows is on its way, clearing the street, stepping back, not because the parade is there, but because the parade is close. And the light in the kitchen was different now too, stronger. The gold had deepened. The window over the sink was no longer a soft, grey, uncertain thing. It was bright, genuinely bright. The sun somewhere just below the roofline of the houses across the street, about to clear them. About to come over the top and pour itself into the yard and through the glass and across the counter and onto the floor. The linoleum was already catching it, a long, warm rectangle of light stretching from the base of the sink cabinet toward the table. The same shape you'd seen in that kitchen 100 mornings, but always after someone else had already come down, always after the overhead light was on and the radio was playing, and the room was full of its daytime self. Now you were seeing the light arrive on its own terms, the light before anyone claimed it. The light as it was, not as it was used, and the cereal box on the table. Its colors were vivid now. The red was red, the yellow was yellow. They were no longer muted by the grey of early morning. They were themselves, bold and bright and slightly ridiculous in the quiet kitchen, shouting their cheerfulness into a room that was still whispering. the box and its shadow. The shadow was shorter now, or gone, the angle of the light having shifted enough to dissolve it. And the empty bowl beside the box, the white ceramic catching the gold light and glowing faintly, warmly like a small moon on the formica table. And then, a door. Upstairs. Upstairs. The sound of a door opening, not the front door, not a closet door, but a bedroom door. And you knew which one by the sound, because every door in a house has its own voice, its own particular creak or click or whisper. And this one had a specific quality, a wooden heaviness, a slowness in its hinges, and it opened and the sound travelled down the staircase the way all sound travelled down that staircase, funneled and softened by the carpet and the walls, arriving in the kitchen like a letter arrives in a mailbox, delivered from another part of the house, carrying news. And footsteps. Footsteps in the hallway upstairs. Not your footsteps. Not the careful, quiet, creak-avoiding footsteps you'd used earlier. These were different. These were the footsteps of someone who wasn't trying to be quiet. Someone who didn't know there was anything to be quiet for. Someone who was just walking the way people walk when they're awake, and the morning is theirs, and the hallway is just a hallway, not a territory to be navigated in silence. These footsteps were heavier, more present, more real. They had weight and purpose, and they moved across the ceiling above you, the kitchen ceiling, which was the hallway floor, and you could track them, step by step from the bedroom door to the bathroom, and then the bathroom door closed, and then there was quiet again, but it was a busy quiet now, a quiet with someone in it, a quiet with company. And the ceiling. I want to stay with the ceiling for a moment, because you never looked at the kitchen ceiling on any other morning. You never thought about it. But on this morning, sitting at the table in the dim light, hearing the footsteps cross above you, you were aware of the ceiling the way you're aware of the sky when you hear a plane. You looked up instinctively, even though there was nothing to see. Just the flat white surface with its faint texture, its barely visible brush strokes from the last time it was painted, and the light fixture in the center, the round one, the glass dome with the small brass ring, dark now, unlit, waiting for someone to flip the switch on the wall. And the footsteps moved across that ceiling, muffled by carpet, softened by distance, but real, present. The sound of the house beginning to inhabit itself again, the way a town inhabits itself on a weekday morning. One person, then another, until the streets are full and the quiet is gone and you can't remember what it sounded like before, can't quite recall the particular quality of the emptiness, even though you were in it, even though you were the one who heard it, the one who sat in it, the one who held it for as long as it lasted. And you sat at the table, and the bowl was in front of you empty, with the spoon resting in it, and the clock was ticking. And the light from the window was stronger now, warmer, more gold than grey, and the kitchen was brighter than it had been when you'd first come down the stairs, brighter in a way that made the room look different, more ordinary, more daytime, more like the kitchen you knew from every other morning when you came down and the lights were on and the radio was playing and the day was already in progress. The magic wasn't gone. That's not the right word. It was never magic. It was just stillness. It was just quiet. It was just the ordinary world in its resting state. But the stillness was thinning, the way morning mist thins. You could still feel it, still sense it in the cool of the linoleum and the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock, but it was no longer the only thing in the room. It was sharing the room now, with the sound from upstairs, with the light from outside, with the approaching morning and everything it would bring. And there was a feeling, not sadness, not loss, something gentler than either of those. Something like the feeling you get when you've been watching a sunset and the last color fades and the sky is just sky again, and you breathe out and you don't feel sad, you just feel finished, complete, like you were there for all of it, like you didn't miss any of it, like the thing you were watching gave you everything it had and you received everything it gave, and now it's over and that's all right. That's as it should be. The stillness was ending. Not because anything was wrong, not because anything was broken, but because mornings end. Because houses wake up. Because the world doesn't stay still, can't stay still, wasn't made to stay still. It was made to move, to stir, to fill with sound and light and the footsteps of people going about their lives, and the stillness, the beautiful, particular, unrepeatable stillness of a Saturday morning before anyone else was awake, was just a pause, a rest in the music, a held breath between one phrase and the next. And soon, not now but soon, there would be footsteps on the stairs. Your stairs, the ones with the creak in the third step from the top. And the creak would sound different from this end, heard from the kitchen, instead of made by the foot, heard from below, instead of felt from above. And it would mean someone was coming down, someone was entering the kitchen, someone was about to turn on the light, that overhead light, the bright one, the one that would make the kitchen a kitchen again, instead of this quiet, dim, private world you'd been living in. And the day would begin, the real day, the Saturday. There's still a moment. There's still this last, thin, dissolving edge of the stillness, this last breath before the house fills up, this last beat of the clock that belongs to you alone. And you're in it. You're sitting at the table with the empty bowl, and the clock is ticking, and the faucet is dripping, and the light is gold on the linoleum, and the bird is still singing outside, fainter now, or maybe just harder to hear over the sounds from upstairs. The sounds of the house coming to life the way a fire comes to life. Slowly, then all at once, one flame and then another, until the whole thing is going and the cold is forgotten and the dark is forgotten and everything is warm and bright and alive. But you remember the cold. You remember the dark. You remember the still. You remember the kitchen before the light was turned on, before the radio was turned on, before the voices and the footsteps and the running water and the ordinary Saturday sounds filled every corner of every room. You remember the clock ticking for no one, the faucet dripping for no one, the dew on the grass glittering for no one, the bird singing for no one. All of it happening in the early morning, in the grey gold light, in the quiet that was not empty but full. Full of the house, full of the sleeping, full of the waiting, full of the kind of stillness that only exists when a boy wakes up before the world does and comes downstairs and sits in the kitchen and does nothing, needs nothing, wants nothing, and the morning holds him the way the night is holding you right now, gently, completely, without any expectation, except that you be here. Be here. I'm going to put on the last record of the night, the last one. And it's going to be slow, and it's going to be quiet, and it's going to have space in it, the same kind of space that was in that kitchen, the same kind of room, the same kind of patience. And when it's done, the night will be almost over, and the morning will be almost here. And the stillness, this stillness, the one between you and me, the one we've been sharing all night, through the microphone and the speaker and the dark, this stillness will thin too. It will dissolve the way all stillnesses dissolve, gently, without announcement, making way for whatever comes next. But it was here. It was real. The way that Saturday morning was real. The way the clock was real, and the cereal was real, and the dew was real, and the bird was real, and the boy at the table was real. Sitting alone in a kitchen in the early light, in the last quiet minutes before the house woke up, in the most ordinary and the most perfect part of an ordinary and perfect day that no one photographed and no one wrote about, and no one thought to save except the body, which saves everything, which keeps everything, which holds the temperature of the linoleum and the sound of the clock and the taste of sweet milk at the bottom of the bowl and the sight of a backyard glittering in the dew, and holds them, and holds them, and holds them, and is holding them now, tonight, in the dark, in the bed, in the quiet, in the still room where you are resting, where you are breathing, where you are almost asleep, where you are almost there, almost there. Good night. From the low end of the dial, from the warm chair in the quiet studio, from the small hours that belong to no one and to everyone and to you. Good night. The clock is still ticking. The kitchen is still there. The morning is always beginning, somewhere, in some house, in some quiet room where the light comes in and the air is cool and the stillness is waiting for you to sit down in it and stay. Stay. Here's the last one. Let it carry you the rest of the way.